Story 1. My father cut me out of his life, and now he wants me to take care of his second family. I never thought I'd find myself here looking for advice, but life sometimes has strange ways of hitting you where it hurts the most. This is a delicate subject for me, and the confusion in my head is so great that I don't know where to begin. I'll try to be as clear as possible. My father and I have never had a good relationship. When I was 8 years old, he left my mother. It wasn't an amicable separation. My mother and I watched him fade from our lives without looking back. I clearly remember how that absence felt like a permanent void, a kind of loss you can never be prepared for. At that age, he didn't just leave home, he left my life. He married another woman shortly after, whom I'll call Sophia. With her, he had 3 more children, all younger than me. As I grew up, it became very clear that my father had decided to completely restart his life. While my mother struggled to raise me alone, my father seemed focused solely on his new family. The calls, the visits, the small gestures that could have made a difference, none of that happened. Forgotten birthdays, ignored graduations, not a single word of encouragement. In fact, the times he did decide to show up were more painful than his absence. Cold interactions and conversations that always ended with excuses and empty promises. Then, when I turned 18, we had a conversation that marked the official end of our already non-existent relationship. I remember every word because it was like a stab directly to the heart. He told me that he had already fulfilled his paternal duty, and that, being an adult, he owed me nothing more. Now you have to fend for yourself, like I did, were his words. I remember the coldness in my chest when I understood I was alone in this. There were no tears, because there were no tears left to cry. I focused on surviving, on building a life without him, one that didn't depend on a father who never wanted to be there. Fast forward a few years. I managed to get ahead, work, studies, and a circle of friends who support me unconditionally. It wasn't easy, and I still carry scars from that non-existent relationship, but I learned not to expect anything from him. My mother has always been my pillar, and it's thanks to her that I've learned to be strong and to fend for myself. But all that changed recently, with a call I never expected to receive. It was Sophia, my father's second wife. Her voice cracked as she told me that my father was sick, very sick. "He wants to see you, he wants to talk to you," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Then came the part that left me speechless. She asked me to help take care of my younger siblings. She was on the verge of collapse, not knowing how to deal with everything that was happening, and she was convinced that I, the forgotten son, could save the situation. My first reaction was disbelief. My father wants me to help him after all these years of abandonment and open wounds? I couldn't believe it. But then came the anger, a rage that coursed through my body like a burning fire. I spent my childhood and adolescence wishing he would see me, care about me, love me, and now, when he's at his lowest point, he expects me to become his support. Emotions swirled in my mind, and I couldn't say anything coherent to Sophia. I just hung up, trembling. And here I am, not knowing what to do. I have no obligation to them, do I? And yet, a part of me feels guilty. The children are not to blame for my father's decisions. But helping now would be betraying the child inside me, who never had a present father. I've sought advice from some friends, and their responses have been varied. Some think I shouldn't get involved at all, that it's textbook emotional manipulation. Others say I should consider it, not for my father, but for the children who, like me, didn't choose this. Am I being selfish if I decide to walk away and protect myself emotionally? Or would I be a fool if I let them use me this way, after everything I've been through? Reddit, I need your wisdom. Update 1. I've been turning this over in my mind, feeling trapped between the desire to protect myself and a strange sense of responsibility that I don't fully understand. So, after a lot of thinking, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, confront my father face to face. I confessed that, on the way to his house, my stomach was in knots. Sophia and my father's house is on the outskirts of town, in a neighborhood I had always avoided. Passing through the streets where I had played as a child, the ones where I had dreamed of my father returning, hit me harder than I expected. My body felt tense, and, for a second, I thought about turning around and running away. But I kept going. I needed answers. When I arrived, Sophia greeted me at the door with a mixture of relief and exhaustion in her eyes. It was evident that she had been dealing with stress I couldn't even imagine for weeks, maybe months. The children, my half-siblings, were in the living room, looking at me with curiosity and some shyness. I didn't know them well. I had seen them a few times at family gatherings when I was younger, but I had never felt that they were part of my life. Still, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry to see their faces filled with confusion and sadness over what was happening in their family. Sophia led me to my father's room. The atmosphere was heavy, loaded with memories and unspoken things. There he was, in bed, looking like I never expected to see him. It was the first time I saw him vulnerable. I had always remembered him as an imposing, authoritarian figure, someone who was in absolute control. But now he seemed shrunken, reduced to an old and tired man, with dull eyes and a weak voice. I had a hard time recognizing him. "Thank you for coming," he said, and his voice trembled a little. I don't know if it was the tone or the fact that he was thanking me for something, but I was paralyzed for a second. I didn't know if I was ready for this moment. I wondered if I should yell at him, release all the resentment accumulated over the years. But I didn't. "What do you want from me?" was the first thing I managed to say, and although I tried to make my voice sound firm, a small crack of emotion crept into the tone. My father closed his eyes for a moment, as if dealing with the weight of a crushing guilt. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he said. "I know I don't deserve your help, but it's not for me. It's for them." He gestured toward the living room, where the muffled voices of my siblings could be heard. His apology wasn't perfect or complete, but it was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from him. The anger was still there, bubbling beneath the surface, but now it was accompanied by something else. I can't say it was compassion, but it was something that made my heart soften a little. After a while of uncomfortable silence, I got up and left the room. I didn't know what to think or how to feel. Sophia looked at me hopefully, but I had no answers for her. I just wanted to get out of there, breathe fresh air, try to sort out the chaos in my head. But something happened when I crossed paths with the children in the living room. The youngest, who must have been about 6 or 7, looked at me with a mixture of fear and curiosity. I wanted to say something, anything to alleviate that fear, but I couldn't find the words. I went home feeling emotionally drained. My mother called me that night, worried, and I told her everything. She was furious when she learned that my father was asking me for help, and her words made me feel like I was right to be angry. "You don't owe him anything," she said. "That man abandoned you. He has no right to ask you for anything." And I know, deep down I know she's right, but I can't stop thinking about those kids. They are not to blame for my father's decisions, and I know exactly what it's like to grow up without support. So here I am, still struggling with what the right thing to do is. I know that helping could be a mistake, but I also know that my decision could make a difference for those children who, like me years ago, have no one else. Update 2. After that first visit, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen and felt. The image of my father, frail and without the aura of power that had always surrounded him, kept haunting me. And then there were those children, my siblings, who don't even know how hard I've fought not to be like him. I thought maybe I should look for closure, some kind of inner peace, even though I didn't know exactly how to find it. So I decided to go back, this time with the intention of having a real conversation, one that could help me decide which path to take. When I returned to Sophia's house, she greeted me with a mixture of relief and worry. She took me directly to the living room, where my siblings were playing quietly. They didn't have the typical energy of children. It was as if a cloud of sadness was floating over them. I sat on the sofa, trying to smile even though it was difficult. The oldest, who must be about 13, looked at me with a mixture of distrust and curiosity. I wondered how much he knew about me and our family history. Sophia interrupted the silence to take me to my father's room again. This time, he was sitting in a chair, looking a little more lucid. He seemed to have prepared for this conversation, although his face still reflected the weight of years and past decisions. He gestured for me to sit across from him. "I know this situation isn't fair to you," he began. "I've been thinking about it a lot, and I know I've failed in many things, especially with you." There was a tremor in his voice, and that took me by surprise. All my life, he had been a strong and arrogant man. I never thought I'd see him doubt himself. "I don't know if it's too late, but I wanted you to know that, even if it doesn't seem like it, I've always regretted what I did. I have no excuses." I remained silent for a moment. The words seemed sincere, but I couldn't help but wonder if it was too little, too late. The apology was something I had waited to hear all my life. But upon hearing it, I didn't feel the relief I had imagined. I realized that no apology could change what had happened. But there was something else at stake. Those children who weren't to blame for anything. I couldn't help but feel that, somehow, I was living in a cycle of abandonment that they didn't deserve to suffer. But why are you asking me to help? I finally asked. Don't you have anyone else in your life who can be there for them? My father ran a shaky hand over his face, as if it was difficult for him to admit it. We don't have any close family, and Sophia is overloaded. I would like them to have someone to take care of them if things get worse. I left the room feeling even more conflicted than before. I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair the situation was for everyone. For my mother, who had to sacrifice so much. For me, who was abandoned. And for those children, who now faced the fear of losing their father. Sophia approached and thanked me for coming. You have no idea how much it would mean to them if you were a part of their lives, she said with tears in her eyes. Upon returning home, I felt more lost than ever. My mother, upon learning that I had seen my father again, was furious. I can't believe he's trying to manipulate you again, she said. You don't owe that man anything. He walked out on you and me when we needed him most. Don't let him take advantage of you now that it suits him. I know, and she's right. But there's something inside me that can't stop thinking about those kids who, like me, are not at fault for the mistakes of the adults around them. I also think of myself at their age, how alone and helpless I felt, and I'm terrified of the idea that they have to feel the same way. I've been looking for options. I've considered the idea of helping, but with clear boundaries. Maybe I could commit to certain hours, certain days. But I'm worried that any kind of involvement will end up being emotionally destructive for me. I've also been researching whether there are community resources or support services that can help the family without it all depending on me. I wish all this were simpler, but nothing seems to be. Update 3. I realized that, although the situation was deeply unfair, I couldn't let the wounds of my past continue to define my present. But I also knew that I wasn't willing to sacrifice my emotional well-being or fall into a trap of obligations that my father never fulfilled with me. I needed to find a way to protect myself while doing what I felt was right. So, with that in mind, I went back to my father's house one last time, this time determined to set very clear boundaries. I had thought a lot about how I wanted to approach this, and I wrote a list of things I was willing to do and others that I wasn't. I carried the list in my pocket, and the simple fact of having it gave me some strength. When I arrived, Sophia was so grateful to see me that I almost burst into tears. I saw the children playing in the living room and felt a pang in my chest. It wasn't their fault that things were so bad, and it hurt me to think that they could go through the same age that I lived. But, still, I knew I couldn't fix everything alone. I went to my father's room and told him directly that I was willing to help, but with conditions. His eyes widened a little when he heard me, as if he didn't expect anyone to dare set limits on him. I explained that my own mental health was important and that I couldn't let this situation drag me down. I told him I would help by taking care of the children on certain days and hours, but only if it didn't interfere with my work and personal responsibilities. I also told him that I would not be his personal caregiver. My help was for the children, not for him. My father looked at me for a moment, and it was difficult to read his expression. Finally, he nodded, and although he didn't say much, he seemed relieved. Sophia also accepted my conditions, although her face showed a bit of disappointment. I think she expected more from me. But, honestly, I was already doing much more than I ever imagined. I also mentioned that I would seek outside help. I told them about the possibility of contacting social workers or community programs that could provide long-term support, something more sustainable than my occasional presence. After that, I stayed in the living room with my siblings for a while. I introduced myself better, and they, at first, were still somewhat shy. But the youngest, a boy named Lucas, finally came over and showed me a drawing he had made. It was simple, but it hit me straight in the heart. It was a drawing of him with his family, all together, with happy smiles. I don't know if he was aware that the reality was more complicated, but his hope was palpable, and it broke my heart. In the end, I left feeling exhausted, but more at peace with my decision. It wasn't what my father expected, nor what he probably wanted, but it was the best I could offer given the circumstances. I didn't want to allow guilt or manipulation to dictate my life, but neither did I want to be a person who turned their back on innocent children who were suffering. Since then, I have kept my part of the bargain. I've spent time with the kids, taking them to the park, or helping them with their homework when I can. I don't go beyond what I committed to do, and I've made sure to seek additional help for them. But even with these limits, it's not easy. Each visit reminds me of everything I lost and everything I'll never have with my own father. I've learned that, although I can't change the past, I can decide how to deal with the consequences. I don't know if this is the right decision or if I'll regret it someday, but I'm trying to be true to myself while doing what I think is right. Update 4. My father passed away a few weeks ago. His illness had progressed faster than any of us expected, and although Sophia had tried to stay strong, it was as if the weight of everything fell at once. I remember receiving the call at 3 in the morning. Sophia's voice, broken by pain. "He's gone," she said. And although those words were something I had expected in some corner of my mind, they still hit me like a tidal wave. I confess, a part of me didn't know how to feel. My relationship with my father was always complicated, full of absences, wounds, and broken promises. And yet, knowing he was gone forever brought a wave of emotions that left me reeling. It wasn't just the fact that he had died. It was the definitive closure, the certainty that there would never be another conversation that could fix what was broken. The day of the funeral was a whirlwind of sensations. I arrived feeling out of place, like a stranger in my own family. The house was full of familiar faces, but I felt distant, disconnected. Sophia hugged me so tightly I thought she would break in my arms. My siblings, dressed in their best black clothes, looked smaller and more vulnerable than ever. Lucas, the youngest, didn't quite understand what was happening. He looked at me and asked me if Dad was in heaven, and I didn't know what to say. I knelt down and hugged him, trying to hold back the tears that were struggling to come out. When it came time to say a few words about my father, Sophia looked at me as if she wanted me to speak. It was a desperate gesture, a silent plea. And although my mother had warned me not to let myself be manipulated, I felt I had to do it. Not for him, but for the children. I stood up, my heart pounding in my throat, and walked to the lectern. I looked at the coffin and, suddenly, all the memories I had tried to bury came to the surface. My father teaching me to ride a bike when I was 5 years old. His stern voice telling me that men don't cry. The times he didn't show up when I needed him most. And then, I took a deep breath and began to speak. My relationship with my father was complicated, I said, my voice trembling. There were moments of love and many moments of distance. I often wished things had been different, that he had been there for me in a way that he never was. But what I do know is that, even though I didn't always understand him, he was a man who loved in his own way, even if that way wasn't always enough for me. The words weighed on me like stones. It wasn't a perfect tribute, nor full of affection, but it was honest. I looked at my siblings and saw that they were crying, clinging to each other, and I realized that they could still feel love for him in a way that I couldn't. After my speech, I returned to my seat feeling as if all my energy had been drained. The days following the funeral were a whirlwind of paperwork, legal matters, and moments of tension. Sophia was devastated and overwhelmed. And although I had set boundaries before, now I felt I had to be there a little more. The children needed me, and it was a role I never thought I would have, being the older brother they could look to for comfort. But I've also felt the emotional burden of all of this. My mother, upon learning of my father's death, showed a pain that she had kept hidden for years. The loss affected her more than she admitted at first, and seeing her vulnerability was like witnessing a wound that had never fully healed. "I'm sorry for you, and I'm sorry for us," she said with tears in her eyes. "He left a mark on our lives, and although I wish I could say it no longer hurts, it still does. Since my father's death, I felt a strange emptiness. I didn't love him in the traditional way, but his absence is like a door that is closed forever, leaving me with unanswered questions. I try to be strong for my siblings, but also for myself. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from all of this, but I'm trying to live with the certainty that I did the best I could. Did I do well to help despite everything? Was it right to set limits and at the same time, try to be supportive? I don't know. But here I am, still learning, still feeling, still trying to find my way." Story 2. My ex-wife and her fiancé believe my financial obligations extend to their stepchildren. I was married to my ex-wife, Laura, for 10 years. Our relationship had its ups and downs, like any marriage, but we eventually reached a point where we both knew that staying together wasn't the best thing for us or for Max. We divorced 3 years ago on reasonably amicable terms and established a joint custody agreement. Max spends 1 week with me and 1 week with his mom, and I pay child support that more than covers his needs. I've always honored that agreement without complaint, because Max deserves the best from both of us. 2 years ago, Laura started dating a man named Tom, who has 2 children from a previous relationship, Owen, 10, and Emma, 8. I didn't mind at all when their relationship became serious. In fact, I was glad that Laura found someone. Her happiness is good for Max, and as long as Tom treated my son well, I had no problem with him. 6 months ago, Laura and Tom got engaged, and since then they have been living together with their respective children. So far, everything seemed to be going well. Max got along with Owen and Emma, and Laura said that Tom was a good stepfather. However, a couple of months ago, Laura started hinting that I should do more financially, because now Max lives in a home with 2 other children who also need support. At first, I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe she meant collaborating on minor things, like extracurricular activities that involved all 3 children. But it soon became clear that her expectations went much further. Laura mentioned that since Max is part of a shared household with Owen and Emma, it would be unfair if they had fewer opportunities just because their father isn't in the picture. Basically, she expected me to contribute financially to the activities and needs of Tom's children. The first time she told me, I laughed because, honestly, I thought it was a joke. When I saw that she was serious, I calmly told her that my responsibilities were solely towards Max and that I respected that they, as a couple, manage their own finances. Since then, this has escalated. Laura accuses me of being selfish, and Tom even sent messages insinuating that I don't care about my son's emotional well-being because, according to him, Max might feel affected if he sees that his step-siblings have fewer opportunities. I want the best for Max, but I don't think financing someone else's children is part of my responsibilities. It's a complicated dilemma, because I want to maintain a good relationship with Laura for Max's sake, but I also have to draw a clear line. What worries me most is that this situation could affect my son, who has started asking questions like, "Why can't you help Owen and Emma?" Update 1. First, thanks to everyone who commented and gave me advice. It was reassuring to know that I'm not the only one who thinks this situation is completely unfair. However, things got even more complicated after my initial post. So here's the first update. A few days after our last conversation, Laura brought up the subject again, this time more directly. She called me to specifically ask me to cover part of the cost of a summer camp for all 3 children, Max, Owen, and Emma. The camp was quite expensive, something I could afford for Max alone, but definitely not for 3 children. I told her that Max could go to camp without a problem and that I was willing to cover his share, as I always have. That's when Laura lost her patience. She accused me of being petty and selfish because, according to her, the 3 children have developed a close bond, and it would be devastating for Owen and Emma to be left out while Max has fun at camp. She insisted that I was ignoring the family dynamic and that, by not helping, I was fostering an unequal environment in Max's home. I tried to explain as calmly as possible that my financial responsibilities are towards my son, not towards her fiancé's children. I reminded her that Tom has his own obligation as a father and that they both should work together to manage the needs of their blended family. This was not well received. Shortly after our conversation, I started receiving messages from Tom. They were interesting, to say the least. Initially, they were passive-aggressive, things like, "I hope you can reflect and realize how your actions impact your children and their environment. As a father, I would do anything to make sure my children feel supported in every way." I ignored the messages at first, but then they became more direct, accusing me of not being a good example for Max. One said something like, "Owen and Emma admire Max a lot. Do you really want to be the reason they feel less important?" This last message left me furious because I felt he was trying to emotionally manipulate me using Max as an excuse. I didn't respond because I didn't want to fuel the drama, but I realized that I needed to set clear boundaries, not only with Laura, but also with Tom. Meanwhile, Max began to notice that something was going on. During his last visit, he casually asked me, "Why aren't Owen and Emma going to camp? What if there's a way they could all go together?" It was obvious that Laura and Tom had mentioned the subject to him, which bothered me because I don't want Max to be in the middle of these discussions. I told Max that I would love for him to go to camp and that I will always do everything possible to support him, but that it's not up to me to decide what Owen and Emma do. He seemed to accept the answer, but I couldn't help but feel guilty, even though I know I shouldn't. To be honest, this situation is wearing me down. I don't want Max to think that I don't care about his family on his mom's side, but I'm not going to allow myself to be manipulated into taking on responsibilities that are not mine. Update 2. A lawyer intervenes. My lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. I have no financial obligation to Owen or Emma, now or in the future, regardless of their relationship with Max or how Laura and Tom manage their finances. He recommended that I keep all communication on this subject in writing and avoid heated discussions that could escalate. He also assured me that any attempt by Laura to modify our child support agreement would be unfounded, as long as I continue to fulfill my current obligations, which I have done without fail. With this information in mind, I decided to set a clear boundary with Laura. I sent her a long and calm message where I reaffirmed that my priority is Max and that I will always be willing to cover his needs and activities. However, I made it clear that I cannot and will not assume financial responsibility for Owen and Emma. I also respectfully asked her not to involve Max in these matters, as I believe it is unfair for him to feel pressured to take sides in something that is not his concern. Laura's response was, in a word, explosive. She told me that I was acting legalistically and that I was incapable of seeing the big picture. According to her, I am ignoring how the dynamics of her home emotionally affect Max. She even hinted that my lack of support could cause Max to feel isolated or resentful towards me in the future. Not satisfied with that, Laura and Tom started using Max in a more direct way. During our last call, Laura mentioned that Max had made comments about how Owen and Emma felt they weren't good enough because they couldn't participate in the same activities as him. This infuriated me because it was obvious that they were using Max as a tool to pressure me. I wanted to confront this manipulation immediately, so I talked to Max during our next week together. It was a delicate conversation because I didn't want to put him in an uncomfortable position, but I felt it was important to clarify things. I told him something like, "Max, I will always be here for you, and I will do everything I can so that you have the best. But I also want you to know that what Owen and Emma do or don't do is not up to me. Their parents are the ones who make those decisions. You don't have to worry about it or feel bad." Max seemed relieved, but he also confessed to me that his mom and Tom had talked to him about how the family needs to work together and that sometimes he felt that he should ask them for less so that Owen and Emma wouldn't feel bad. This broke my heart because he was clearly carrying an emotional weight that doesn't belong to him. I assured him that he would never have to stop enjoying what he has the right to do just because other people can't do it. I also told him that he can always talk to me if anything makes him feel uncomfortable. Since that conversation, Max has been calmer, but I can't help but feel angry at Laura and Tom for putting him in this position. Fortunately, I think our relationship is still strong, and I will do everything possible so that doesn't change. For now, I'm following my lawyer's advice. I keep all communication in writing and don't respond to provocations. Laura seems to have reduced the direct demands, but I know this isn't over. I appreciate any advice on how to handle interactions with Tom, because it's clear that he doesn't plan to back down in this situation. Update 3. Hi community. I'm here with another update because, as expected, the situation hasn't completely calmed down. It's been a few weeks since the last direct confrontation with Laura, but I feel that the conflict has taken a more subtle form, though no less harmful. After the conversation I had with Max, things between us seemed to be calmer. He started to be more relaxed during his time with me and stopped making comments about Owen and Emma or about the things it would be nice for everyone to do together. I thought that maybe Laura and Tom had decided to back down with the manipulation, but, as usual, that was too optimistic. During our last week together, Max mentioned something that set off my alarms again. We were having dinner when he casually said, "Mom said that sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the family. Do you think so, Dad?" I tried to answer carefully because this clearly came from a conversation at Laura's house. I told him yes, that sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the people you love, but that doesn't mean you have to carry everything. I explained that every family finds its way of working as a team, but that it's always important to talk things over with the adults so you don't feel pressured. Max didn't say much afterwards, but I could see that he was processing my words. It was painful to realize that Laura and Tom were still pressuring him indirectly, using ideas about family to make him feel that he should act as a mediator or sacrifice himself for his step-siblings. As if that wasn't enough, Tom decided to take the matter to a new level: social media. A few days ago, a mutual friend sent me a screenshot of a post that Tom had made on Facebook. It said something like, "Nothing is more painful than seeing someone who should be a role model turn their back on their family. Children deserve equality and love. #priorities #family." Although he didn't mention me directly, it was clear that it was aimed at me. The worst part was that some of the comments were from distant relatives and acquaintances who criticized me, saying things like, "It's a shame when parents don't take responsibility," or "Children shouldn't pay for the mistakes of adults." I'm not someone who gets involved in social media drama, so I didn't respond. But this caused several family members to write to me directly asking if it was true that I was refusing to help Max's new siblings. I had to explain the situation to those closest to me and block others who clearly just wanted to give their opinion without knowing anything. What frustrates me most about this situation is that Tom is painting me as the villain when the reality is that he should be financially responsible for his own children. It seems that he doesn't understand or care about the impact all this can have on Max. I have decided to take a more proactive approach to protect Max from all this drama. On the one hand, I am strengthening my relationship with him so that he knows he can always trust me. I have started to get more involved in his school and sports activities, making sure he feels my constant support. On the other hand, I am documenting everything that happens, from Laura and Tom's messages to the conversations I have had with Max. I don't want to be paranoid, but I feel that having a record can be useful if this escalates legally. For now, I'm trying to stand firm without being confrontational. However, I know this is not the end. Laura and Tom seem determined to include me in their financial dynamic, and although I refuse to give in, every day feels like a new emotional challenge. Update 4. Hello again. If I thought Tom's social media post was the lowest point they could reach, I was wrong. Since my last update, things have escalated in ways I never imagined, and I'm honestly emotionally exhausted. A week ago, Laura contacted me again, this time by text message. She asked me to cover the costs of school uniforms for all 3 children. According to her, Owen and Emma need new uniforms, but buying for all 3 at the same time would be a financial burden that she and Tom cannot fully assume. She explained that if I paid for Max and the other 2 children at the same time, it would be more fair and would prevent Owen and Emma from feeling excluded. I was no longer surprised by this request, but it did bother me deeply. I replied directly but calmly. "Laura, I understand that managing a blended family can be complicated, but my financial responsibilities are solely towards Max. I am more than willing to cover his needs, as I always have. However, Owen and Emma are not my responsibility. That is something you and Tom must handle together." Her response was almost immediate, and she didn't hold back. "Do you really think it's fair that Max has everything while his siblings don't? Do you think that doesn't affect their relationship? Maybe it would be better for a judge to decide if your idea of being a good father is really enough." The threat of taking me to court was the last straw. I decided not to respond anymore and forwarded everything to my lawyer. He assured me that Laura has no legal basis to modify the child support agreement, especially since I comply on time and Max has never lacked anything. Not satisfied with that, Tom decided to go a step further. During the exchange with Laura, Tom sent me a message that started with a passive-aggressive tone and ended up being openly hostile. The most worrying part was when he wrote, "You're the kind of person who will make their child grow up resentful. I hope you're ready to deal with the consequences when Max understands how selfish you've been." That's when I decided to block Tom on all communication channels. There's no reason for him to engage directly with me, especially in that way. If he needs to talk about anything related to Max, he should do it through Laura. Unfortunately, this situation is also affecting Max. During his last visit, I noticed that he was quieter than usual. When I asked him if something was wrong, he simply said, "Mom says you're mad at her and Tom. Is it true?" I tried to explain to him in a simple way that I'm not angry, but that there are things we don't agree on, and that doesn't mean we can't continue to be good parents to him. Max seemed to accept my answer, but he still looked somewhat worried. What breaks my heart is that I know Laura and Tom are using Max to try to manipulate me. They are putting him in the middle of a situation that shouldn't be his. My priority continues to be to protect him from all this tension, but I can't control what Laura and Tom tell him when he's with them. After this latest series of events, my lawyer suggested I send a formal letter to Laura making it clear that any attempt to modify our child support agreement or to use Max as a tool to obtain additional financial support will not be tolerated. He also recommended that I document any future communication to protect myself in case they decide to take this further. For now, I am focusing on strengthening my relationship with Max and making sure he knows he can talk to me about anything. I'm looking for family therapy for him, so he has a safe space where he can process his emotions without feeling like he has to choose between his parents. Final update: legal intervention and the immediate effect. Following my lawyer's advice, we sent a formal letter to Laura. It clearly established the boundaries. My financial obligations are exclusively towards Max. Any attempt to use Max as an intermediary or to pressure him emotionally will be taken seriously as a violation of his well-being. All communication on sensitive issues must be in writing to avoid misunderstandings, and, if necessary, there will be additional legal measures. The tone of the letter was firm, but not aggressive. We wanted to make it clear that I am not willing to give in, but that my priority continues to be Max's well-being. Laura's initial reaction was one of indignation. She sent me a message full of reproaches, saying that I was damaging the family dynamic and that I was incapable of thinking about the big picture. However, my lawyer recommended that I not respond, and although it was difficult, I followed his advice. Interestingly, after a few days, Laura changed her tone. She sent me a more conciliatory message, saying that she didn't want this conflict to affect Max and that she would try to handle things differently. It was a small step, but progress at last. After noticing that Max was still showing some concern about the situation, I decided to enroll him in family therapy sessions. At first, I wasn't sure how he would take it, but it turned out to be a good decision. The therapist helped us, Max and me, understand how to better manage our conversations and establish a safe space for him to express what he feels without fear that it will cause problems between the adults. During one of the sessions, Max expressed that it bothered him when he felt he had to be the bridge between his mom, Tom, and me. He said that although he wanted Owen and Emma to be happy, he also wanted to be able to enjoy things without feeling guilty. These words confirmed to me that the pressure Laura and Tom were exerting had impacted him more than I thought. The therapist gave us tools to handle this situation and helped us strengthen our relationship. Max seems much more relaxed, and I'm doing everything possible to make him feel that his only job as a child is to be happy. Since the legal intervention and therapy, the situation with Laura and Tom has changed. Although I don't think they completely agree with me, it seems they have accepted that I am not going to assume financial responsibilities for Owen and Emma. The requests have ceased completely, and communication with Laura is now strictly limited to matters related to Max. Tom, for his part, seems to have withdrawn from the conflict. I don't know if it was because of my lawyer's letter or because Laura asked him to step back, but I haven't received any more messages or hints from him. Even the social media drama has disappeared. This has been one of the most difficult challenges I have faced as a father. Throughout all of this, I learned how important it is to set clear boundaries, not only to protect myself, but also to protect Max. I understand that managing a blended family is not easy, but that doesn't mean that the burden should fall on someone who is not part of that equation. My relationship with Max remains strong, and I believe this whole process has brought us even closer. It has also made me reflect on my own role as a father and how I can continue to support him as he navigates this complex family dynamic. Thanks to this experience, I learned that sometimes being firm is not being selfish. It is simply protecting what is fair. I am relieved that things are improving, and I hope we can maintain this stability in the long term. Story 3. My grandmother died, but her will holds more secrets than we ever imagined. A few weeks ago, my grandmother passed away. It was a hard blow for the family. Although the truth is, at 92, we all knew this moment would come sooner or later. My grandmother was always the heart of the family. She was one of those people who keeps everything: letters, photos, little souvenirs from trips, even movie tickets from decades ago. She also had a peculiar character, somewhat mysterious, as if she always knew more than she let on. When it came time to read her will, we discovered that she had made very specific decisions. She didn't just divide up her money, which wasn't much, or property. Instead, She left a personal item to each member of the family. At first, I thought it was poetic, as if she wanted each of us to have a symbolic piece of her to remember her by. However, what initially seemed like a sentimental gesture soon turned into something much more disturbing. The day we went to collect our inheritances, each of us received our respective object carefully wrapped. I inherited a small wooden box, quite simple, with wear marks and a broken lock. My cousin got a cookbook, my uncle an antique pocket watch, and so on. No one seemed particularly excited. My mother even joked that my grandmother, bless her heart, had emptied the attic and decided to use that as her will. I didn't pay much attention to the box until I got home. Upon opening it, I discovered something unexpected, an old black and white photo. I didn't recognize the man in it, but something bothered me. He was holding a sign in his hands, as if posing for a portrait, and on the sign was written my full name. At first, I thought it was a coincidence or a mistake. Maybe someone else in my family had the same name as me. However, the more I looked at the photo, the stranger it seemed. The picture was at least 60 years old, and the man, despite his kind expression, seemed to be looking directly at me, as if he knew I would be seeing that photo someday. I tried to let it go, but I couldn't. I called my parents to ask if they knew anything about this photo or if they recognized the man. Neither had any idea. My mother even laughed and said that my grandmother had always kept strange things. Meanwhile, my uncle was dealing with something strange in his inheritance. The pocket watch he received had a letter hidden inside. According to him, it was written by my grandmother and contained details about an accident that occurred decades ago. He didn't want to share much, but he seemed very affected. That same night, my cousin called me. She had been browsing the cookbook that my grandmother left her and found a note written between the pages. It said, "If you ever need answers, go to the house on the outskirts." That's where it all began. Something isn't right. My grandmother was always eccentric, but this goes beyond that. These objects aren't just souvenirs. They all seem to contain a message, a secret that my grandmother wanted to leave behind before she left. I'm starting to suspect that my family isn't what I thought, and that my grandmother knew something she didn't want to take to the grave. I promise to keep you updated as I try to figure out what the hell is going on. Update 1. I couldn't get the photo out of my head. It was as if the man was watching me from the past, waiting for me to recognize him. I spent hours examining it, looking for clues, some detail in the background, in his clothes, something that would give me an idea of who he was. But the photo was strangely simple, almost empty. The man was sitting in a chair in front of a plain wall, holding that sign with my full name. I decided to scan it and enlarge it to see the details better. That's when I noticed something that gave me chills. In a corner of the sign, almost erased by time, there was a date, 1962. That photo was older than I thought, and yet, that man knew my name. I started looking for answers. I called my parents again and asked them to search the family albums, but nothing. My mother even scolded me for obsessing over nonsense. However, when I spoke with my uncle, the conversation took an unexpected turn. He confessed that the letter he found in the watch was more disturbing than he had previously implied. According to my grandmother, an accident had occurred in 1962, involving someone named E and another family member whom she didn't want to name. What left me frozen was that the letter suggested that the accident wasn't really an accident, but a crime. I tried to connect this with my photo, but I didn't have enough information. My uncle didn't want to share more either. "It's better to leave the past where it is," he told me. But I couldn't just ignore this. As if that weren't enough, that night something happened that made me think this isn't just a family mystery. I was working late on my computer, trying to distract myself, when I felt a presence. I looked towards the window and saw someone standing across the street under a streetlight. I couldn't make out his face clearly, but there was something familiar about his silhouette, his posture, the way he was watching me. I went to raise the blinds to get a better look, but before I could, he turned and walked away. What chilled me was that, even though it was only for an instant, I would swear it was the man from the photo. How is that possible if that photo is from 1962? That man would have to be much older, or he couldn't be alive. I'm trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, but I can't ignore the feeling that he was there for me. My cousin, meanwhile, found something new in the cookbook. There was another hidden note. It was shorter, but it mentioned an address, the house in the woods. 1962. That's where it all began. I don't know what all this means, but I'm starting to think these objects don't just hold secrets, but also connections between them. I'm considering visiting that address, but I don't want to do it alone. Update 2. I decided not to wait any longer. My cousin and I agreed to visit the address mentioned in the note from the cookbook. At first, my uncle flatly refused to accompany us, saying that there was already enough darkness in the family, and that we shouldn't dig any further. However, after insisting, he agreed. I think deep down he also wanted answers, but he was too scared to admit it. The address took us to the outskirts of town, to an area I barely remembered. The house was surrounded by tall trees, as if the forest was trying to swallow it whole. It was an old building, small and dilapidated. The windows were broken, and the front door wobbled on its hinges. The place smelled of dampness and neglect. Upon entering, I felt a kind of heaviness, as if the air was charged with something we couldn't see. The living room was empty, the floor covered with dry leaves and dust accumulated over the years. My cousin took out the note she found in the book and read it aloud. That's where it all began. But where exactly? We began to explore room by room. There was no furniture, only peeling walls and mold stains. It was my uncle who noticed something strange, a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. It wasn't easy to see. It was covered by a half-broken board and accumulated leaves. At first, no one wanted to open it, but curiosity won. Inside, there was a small staircase leading down to a basement. The darkness was almost absolute, but the light from our flashlights revealed something unsettling. The basement wasn't as abandoned as the rest of the house. There was a wooden table in the center of the room, and on it, an old safe. My uncle froze when he saw it. It was he who pointed out that the number 1962 was engraved on the box. Everything in this damned mystery pointed to that year. After trying a couple of times, we tried using the exact date of the accident mentioned in the letter he found in the watch. To our surprise, the combination worked. Inside the box were several diaries. They were my grandmother's. Some were very deteriorated, but others could be read perfectly. My cousin began to browse through them. My uncle and I remained silent, waiting. It was in one of the diaries that we found the first big revelation. My grandmother wrote about a child whom she never named, but who seemed to be crucial to the story. She spoke of him as a shadow or a presence. What struck us most was a specific entry. The price of protecting the family is silence. But silence has a cost. He will never leave us, even though we've tried everything. The guilt doesn't disappear, not even with time. We tried to interpret what it meant, but it all seemed like a puzzle. Who was that child? What had happened to him? The most disturbing thing came when I checked another diary, an older one. This one had a list of names: my grandfather, my mother, my uncle, and another name I had never heard before, Gabriel. There was no one with that name in our family, or at least no one I had ever heard of. While we were immersed in the diaries, my cousin noticed something written on the basement wall, almost hidden by the dirt. We used the flashlights to see better. The words were short, but forceful. You should never have forgotten me. It was at that moment that we all felt the same thing. This mystery wasn't just related to the past. It was something that still lived, something that was starting to catch up with us. We returned home with the diaries. There are too many loose pieces, too many loose ends. But one thing is clear. My grandmother kept more secrets than we ever imagined. And that child, Gabriel, seems to be the key to everything. I don't know why, but I feel like someone is waiting for us to discover the truth. Who wrote on that wall? Who was the man in the photo? And more importantly, what really happened in 1962? Update 3. I've spent days immersed in the diaries we found in the house. As I progress, the picture becomes clearer, but also more disturbing. It seems that my grandmother led a double life, or at least a part of her that she never shared with anyone. The name, Gabriel, constantly appeared in her writings, always surrounded by guilt and remorse. She didn't directly mention her relationship with him, but there were clues that suggested he was more important to her than she was willing to admit. One entry in particular chilled me. I never wanted to abandon him, but it was best for everyone. My life wasn't stable enough to raise a child alone. When I met your grandfather, I thought everything would get better, but he didn't want to accept Gabriel. He said I had to choose between my future with him or my past. I decided to protect my future. Gabriel went to another family, and I tried to forget him, but he never forgot me. Gabriel was her son. My grandmother had a son before marrying my grandfather, something she never told us. According to the diaries, she sent him to live with another family when he was still a child, but it doesn't seem like it was a normal adoption. Later, I found another entry that seemed to describe a critical moment. I promised him that everything would be all right, that they would take care of him like I couldn't. But months later, the letter arrived. They told me that Gabriel had run away, that they couldn't control him. Where was he? Nobody knew. My husband forbade me to look for him. He said it was no longer my responsibility. But I always knew he would come back. Gabriel disappeared. I don't know what happened to him after that, but it seems my grandmother lived the rest of her life waiting for him to return. Now everything is starting to fit together. The guilt, the silence, the objects she left us. I'm convinced that the man in the photo is Gabriel. Since I read that entry, I can't stop thinking about the man I saw outside my window. I'm sure it was him. The question is, what does he want? Is he looking for justice? Revenge? Or does he just want us to remember that he existed? This morning, I received a letter with no return address. It didn't have any message, just another copy of the same photo I found in the box. But this time, with a difference, someone had written something on the back. It said, "We'll see each other soon. There are things you need to know about our family. This can't be a coincidence. Gabriel is alive, or at least someone who knows his story." Meanwhile, my uncle finally decided to open up more about the letter he found in the watch. According to him, my grandmother described an incident that occurred in 1962 involving Gabriel and my grandfather. There were few words, but they were blunt. It wasn't an accident. It was a mistake that can't be undone. I tried to save him, but no one wanted to listen. The forest keeps everything. The forest, that house on the outskirts, was surrounded by forest. My uncle believes that something terrible happened to Gabriel there, and that my grandfather was responsible. But if that's true, how does it fit with the man I saw, the one who seems to be following me? I can't help but wonder. Is it really Gabriel, the man from the photo? Or is it someone else trying to unearth what my grandmother wanted to hide forever? While reviewing the diaries, I found something hidden on the last page of one of them. A photo different from the one my grandmother left me. In this one, there is a boy of about 8 years old, with dark hair and sad eyes. Behind him, you can see what appears to be the same house in the woods, but in much better condition. On the back, my grandmother wrote, "Gabriel, 1954, I'm sorry. Everything leads me back to that place. The forest, the house, and whatever happened in 1962. I'm going back there, but this time more prepared. I feel like I'm close to the truth, but I'm also afraid of what I might find." Update 4. The letter I received with the photo was the sign that I had to return to the forest. I couldn't ignore what was happening, even though part of me wanted to. Something, or someone, wants us to discover the truth about Gabriel and what happened in 1962. I decided not to go alone this time. I convinced my cousin and my uncle to accompany me, although my uncle was visibly nervous. He agreed. I think he knows more than he is willing to admit, but he also understands that we can't keep avoiding this. We arrived at the house at dusk. This time, we carried more powerful flashlights and a camera to document what we found. Upon entering, the place felt different, as if someone had been there since our last visit. The trapdoor leading to the basement was open, something none of us had left that way. We went down into the basement once more, and there we found something new. On the table, where the safe had been before, there was now an envelope. Inside, there was another handwritten letter. I recognized my grandmother's handwriting immediately. If you've come this far, then you know about Gabriel. You know he was my son, and that I sent him away. But you don't know what happened next. It's time you knew. In 1962, Gabriel returned to this house. He was full of hate, and I don't blame him. He had spent years wondering why I abandoned him. And when he confronted us, my husband and I, we told him the truth. He wasn't welcome. But what happened next was worse. The letter ended abruptly, as if my grandmother had been interrupted before finishing writing. While we were reading the letter, my cousin noticed something etched into the basement floor. It was a strange symbol, a kind of spiral that looked like it had been made with a knife, or something similar. Around the spiral were carved words, some of which were illegible, but 2 were clear: sorry and forget. After finding the letter, we decided to explore the surroundings of the house. Something told me there was more to discover in the forest. As we walked, my uncle began to tell something he had kept secret until now. "I was a child when the accident happened," he said. I didn't know much at the time, but I remember my dad and mom having a huge argument. They were shouting things about what Gabriel had done and the trouble he had caused. That night, my dad went out into the woods with a shovel. He came back at dawn, and I never knew what he did out there. Mom forbade me to talk about it. I always thought it had to do with the accident, but now I wonder if it was something more. As my uncle spoke, we began to hear noises in the forest, branches cracking, leaves rustling, as if someone was walking around us. We called out, but there was no answer. Then, in the distance, we saw a silhouette among the trees. It was a tall man, motionless, watching us. It couldn't be. It was the man from the photo. When we tried to approach the figure, it disappeared. There was no trace of him. But in the place where we had seen him, we found something buried shallowly, a small, rusty metal box. We opened it right there, and inside were more photos. One of the photos showed my grandmother younger, with a boy who must have been Gabriel. Another showed the house in the woods, but this time surrounded by people we didn't recognize. The most disturbing one was the last one. It showed Gabriel, now an adult, standing in the same woods where we were, with a stern expression and a shovel in his hand. On the back of that last photo, there was a message written in faded ink. The forest keeps everything. Don't come back. We returned home in silence. I don't know what to do with all this, but I feel like we are in danger, as if unearthing these secrets is awakening something that should have remained buried. Final update. It's been days since we found the box in the woods. The feeling that someone is watching us hasn't left me since then. At night, I wake up with the feeling that there is something, or someone, nearby, although I never find anything. But I couldn't keep living with the fear and the questions. We needed definitive answers. I talked to my uncle and my cousin, and we decided to go back to the woods one last time. We knew the risk was real, but we also knew we couldn't keep running from this. My uncle brought a shovel, as if he was certain we would find something that needed to be unearthed. We went back to the spot where we found the box, right where we last saw the man. We started digging, not really knowing what we expected to find. At first, there was only dirt and roots, but after a few minutes, the shovel hit something solid. It was a small coffin, barely big enough for a child. The oxygen seemed to disappear from the air as we unearthed it completely. No one wanted to open it, but we knew we had to. Inside, we found the unthinkable. Human remains, evidently those of a child, and a broken doll next to them. My cousin burst into tears, and my uncle knelt down, unable to speak. We knew who it was. It was Gabriel. My uncle finally confessed what he had been burying in his memory since he was a child. The night of the accident, in 1962, Gabriel had returned to the woods, furious. According to what my uncle overheard, Gabriel had a confrontation with my grandfather that ended in the worst way. My grandfather, fearing the consequences, decided to hide what happened. He forced my grandmother to keep quiet, and they buried Gabriel near the house. The most disturbing thing was that my grandmother, although full of guilt, never sought justice for Gabriel. Instead, she tried to atone by leaving those clues and objects, knowing that someday someone would discover the truth. After unearthing the coffin, something changed. The forest, which before felt oppressive, seemed calmer, almost as if it had let out a sigh. We made sure the remains were taken to the authorities for a proper burial. But even after all this, I'm not sure Gabriel has forgiven us. One night, while I was sleeping, I felt that presence again. I opened my eyes and saw the man from the photo standing at the foot of my bed. I didn't feel fear, but sadness. He was staring at me, with that same stern expression. But this time, he seemed satisfied. He didn't say anything. He just stood there for a few seconds before disappearing, as if he had never been. It's been weeks since then. My family is trying to process everything we discovered. My uncle is seeking therapy, and my cousin wants to write a book about this experience. I, for my part, still feel that there is something more, something we don't fully understand. My grandmother thought she was protecting her family by keeping these secrets, but she only left us a burden we never asked for. At least, now Gabriel has a resting place, and his story has finally come to light. Sometimes I wonder if I'll see him again, if someday I'll feel his presence again. But for now, I try to live knowing that, although the past can be a shadow, the truth always finds a way to come to light. Story 4. 1 week before my wedding, my family told me that my sister was pregnant by my fiancé, and they asked me to disappear from their lives. A few weeks ago, everything was perfect. After a 2-year engagement, my fiancé and I were ready to take the next step. The wedding was a week away, the final details were in place, and I was excited, albeit stressed, like any bride. I can't lie, I always dreamed of this day. I'm the older of two sisters, and my mom used to joke that I would be the first to get married because I was always the organized one, and it seemed like that would be the case. My fiancé and I had been together for 5 years. He was always charming, attentive, and, as far as I knew, completely in love with me. My family adored him too, especially my younger sister, Clara, who seemed to see him as an older brother. Clara and I always had a close relationship despite our differences. She's 3 years younger and was always the more extroverted and charismatic of the two of us. I, on the other hand, am quieter, more of a rule follower. I think that's partly why I never saw what was about to happen coming. It all started last weekend, when my mother asked me to come over to her house. It wasn't unusual, because they often invite me for lunch on Sundays. The strange thing was that, this time, my dad, Clara, and my fiancé were also there. I remember thinking, maybe they want to give us a special wedding gift. God, how naive I was. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt strange. No one was smiling, my mom avoided eye contact, and Clara was quiet, which wasn't typical of her. As soon as I sat down, my mother sighed and started talking. She told me that what she was about to tell me was for my own good, that I had to be strong and understand that sometimes things don't turn out the way one expects. At that moment, I thought that maybe something had happened to a family member, or that there would be some financial problem with the wedding, but I was never even remotely prepared for what I heard. With a calmness that still gives me chills, my mom told me, "Clara is pregnant, and the baby is your fiancé's." For a second, I thought it was a joke. I even let out a nervous laugh and looked at Clara, hoping she would say something like, "It's a bad joke." But she didn't. Instead, she started to cry. My fiancé remained silent, staring at the floor, and my mother, as if it were an intervention, kept talking as if she were on a damn TV show. "We think it's best if you cancel the wedding. The baby needs a stable family, and Clara and he have already made the decision to be together. You have to understand that this is the right thing for everyone." I don't even know how to describe what I felt at that moment. It was as if everything around me blurred. My heart was beating so hard that I felt like I was going to faint. All I could do was look at my mom and say, "How can you ask me this?" She just looked at me as if I were the selfish one in this situation and said, "Because it's for the best. We don't want you in our lives if you can't support them in this." And that was it. There was no room for discussion, for an explanation, for anything. My father barely lifted his head, my fiancé didn't say a word, and Clara didn't even look at me. I got up and left. I don't remember much more of that day, only that I got home, threw my engagement ring on the floor, and stayed crying on the sofa for hours. Since then, I haven't spoken to anyone in my family. My mom has sent me a couple of messages saying that I should get over it, but I don't have the strength to respond. I feel like I lost everything in an instant. My partner, my sister, and my own family. Update 1. After posting my story, I made the decision to leave my city for a few days. A close friend offered me a place to stay at her house, and, without thinking much about it, I packed a bag and left. I needed to physically distance myself from everything, from my apartment, from the memories, from my family's messages. That week was an emotional whirlwind. I felt broken, confused, and, above all, betrayed. I didn't answer my mother's messages or the attempted calls from some relatives. Yes, they tried to contact me, but not because they were worried about me. All the messages were to reason with me, as if I were a capricious child who didn't understand what was at stake. "Clara is nervous about the pregnancy. You could be more understanding. Your sister needs your support more than ever. We all make mistakes, but the family must stay united." Family, how ironic. Where in this disaster did my family include me as anything other than an obstacle? When I returned to my apartment after that week away, the first thing I noticed was that someone had been there. At first I thought it was paranoia, but my sister has a spare key, or she had one. Small things were missing. A photo of me and my fiancé that used to be in the living room. A couple of ornaments that he had given me. Even a book that I knew was his. It was as if someone had come to clean any trace of him from my space. I called my landlady, and indeed, she confirmed that my sister had come for my wedding things. She claimed that I had given her permission, something that, of course, I never did. Between rage and disbelief, I checked more thoroughly and found something that really broke me: the box of my wedding invitations. My sister had crossed out my name on some of them and written hers. Her name, as if they were planning a wedding for the two of them, with everything I had organized. Who does something like that? That was the moment I knew there was no turning back. I couldn't continue being the person who tried to understand them, nor justify how they could treat me that way. The next day, I changed the locks on my apartment and eliminated any form of contact with them. I blocked numbers, social networks, everything. I also talked to my friend, the same one who offered me a place to stay at her house, and I told her what had happened. She looked at me horrified and said something that resonated with me. They are not your family. A family doesn't do this to you. I don't know if it was that comment, or if the time simply came, but I finally allowed myself to truly cry and scream. Up to that point, everything had been an effort to stay functional. But that night, I let it out. And, although it was painful, it was also liberating. This is the latest, and I'm still trying to understand it. A mutual friend, someone who had known my ex and my sister for years, called me to tell me something that left me frozen. It turns out their relationship wasn't a slip-up. My fiancé and my sister had been seeing each other secretly for months. She even told me that, according to rumors, Clara had planned to get pregnant to make sure he broke up with me. And the worst part, my family probably knew about all of this for a long time. Knowing this destroyed me again, but it also gave me clarity. It wasn't a mistake, it was a planned betrayal, and my family was on their side from the beginning. It's as if they had decided that I was dispensable, as if my entire value in their lives came down to how convenient it was to have me around. I don't know exactly what's next, but one thing I do know. I'm not going to allow them to do this to me again. I've contacted a therapist because I know I can't handle all this weight alone. I'm also considering moving to another city, far away from all of them, to start over. I feel broken, but, at the same time, I have a small spark of strength that I don't want to ignore. It's as if, by losing them, I've also gained something. The opportunity to choose the people I want in my life. Update 2. I took the idea of closing chapters seriously. I changed the locks on my apartment and started working on myself with a therapist. I still find it hard to talk about everything without feeling a lump in my throat, but at least now I can face what happened without completely collapsing, one step at a time. As for my ex and my sister, it seems things aren't going as well as they expected. I learned this thanks to a couple of acquaintances who, although I didn't ask for details, seemed eager to share the gossip. According to what they told me, Clara and my ex-fiancé are now living together in a small apartment. My sister stopped working because she wants to focus on the pregnancy, and, surprise, my ex is carrying all the financial responsibility. I shouldn't be happy about other people's misfortune, but when I heard that they are having financial problems and constantly fighting over money, I couldn't help but feel a kind of dark satisfaction. The most ironic thing is that it seems my family is no longer so happy with the decision they made. My mother has tried to contact me several times, always with messages that begin with things like, "I know we made mistakes, but," or "We don't want this to be permanent. We need our family together." The funny thing is that, although they never say it directly, it feels like they are looking for my help, as if I could be the solution to the problems they created for themselves. I don't know if they are regretful, or simply didn't like the chaos that came after breaking me. A few days ago, a cousin who was always neutral in family problems called me to give me a warning. He told me that Clara was posting things about me on social media, painting me as the villain of the story. According to her, I am a cold and selfish person who didn't want to accept a human error. Supposedly, I was the one dividing the family with my refusal to forgive. Honestly, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry upon hearing something like that. It's impressive how someone can manipulate the narrative to play the victim after what they did. The most interesting thing of all is that my ex, apparently, is also feeling the weight of what they did. A mutual friend told me that he confessed to him that he missed how things were before. Seriously? After everything that happened, it turns out that, in addition to being a traitor, he's a coward who isn't prepared to deal with the consequences of his decisions. I don't know what he expected, but he definitely wasn't expecting sympathy from me. Meanwhile, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life little by little. A few days ago, I made an important decision. I'm going to move. I always wanted to live in another city, and now, without commitments or ties, I have the freedom to do so. I've already started looking for work in a new city, and, although the idea of starting from scratch scares me a little, it also excites me. I know that the road to peace is still long, but, for the first time in weeks, I feel like I'm moving forward. I am learning to let go of resentment, although I admit it's not always easy. There are still nights when I wake up thinking about everything I lost, but I also remind myself that what I really lost was something that wasn't good for me, even though I didn't see it at the time. Update 3. It's been months since I last wrote here, and, honestly, I had no intention of updating again, but something in me feels like this story deserves closure. Not just for you, who have supported me so much, but also for me. This will be the last time I talk about this. Since the last time I wrote, many things have changed. As I mentioned, I decided to move, and I did. I'm writing this from my small and cozy apartment in a completely new city. The move was harder than I expected, not so much physically, but emotionally. Leaving everything behind, even the good things, was painful, but it was also necessary. It was the only way to recover something I felt I had lost, my identity, my sense of who I am without the weight of what my family and my ex-fiancée did. Starting from scratch has been a strange experience. At first, I felt like a stranger in my own life, as if I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do. But, over time, things started to fall into place. I got a new job that I love, I started making friends, and, little by little, I rebuilt my routine. I even started dating someone, albeit very casually, without expectations or pressure. For the first time in a long time, I feel light, as if the weight of the past no longer crushes me. As for my family and my ex-fiancée, things haven't gone so well for them, at least according to what I've heard from third parties. Clara had her baby a couple of weeks ago. I found out because an aunt sent me a message with photos of the baby, accompanied by a note that said, "It's sad that you're not here to meet him." I didn't reply. I didn't feel anything when I saw those photos. No sadness, no anger, no nostalgia. I think that's what surprised me the most, the indifference. From what I know, Clara and my ex are no longer together. Apparently, the fights between them intensified after the baby was born, and he decided to leave. According to some acquaintances, he's living with a friend and trying to rebuild his life. Honestly, I don't care at all what he does. As for Clara, she's living with my parents, who now seem to be dealing with the consequences of everything they supported. This baby was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful for them, but the reality seems to have been very different. My mother tried to contact me again recently. This time, her message was different. Instead of the typical reproaches or attempts at manipulation, she wrote me something that almost seemed like an apology. She said she was wrong and that she missed her daughter. Maybe, at another time in my life, that message would have meant something, but now it doesn't. I no longer feel the need to please her or seek her approval. That is another chain that I managed to break. It's strange how time can change everything. Months ago, this betrayal defined every thought, every emotion, every aspect of my life. Now it doesn't. There are still days when I think about what happened, but it doesn't hurt me in the same way. It's like a scar, something that will always be there, but that no longer burns, no longer opens, no longer defines me. If I learned anything from all of this, it's that peace doesn't come from waiting for others to change or repent. Peace comes from letting go, even when it seems impossible. I can't change what they did to me, but I can choose how I respond to it, and I have chosen to move on. To everyone who supported me here, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have no words to explain how much your messages and advice meant in the darkest moments. If you are reading this and are going through something similar, I just want to tell you that, although everything may seem impossible now, there will come a time when you will stop feeling trapped. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does arrive. And when it does, I promise you that you will feel like you can breathe again. Today I can say that I am okay. Not perfect, not completely healed, but okay. And that, after everything that happened, is more than enough. Story 5. My brother, the favorite son, was arrested during my wedding, and in a fit of rage, revealed a dark family secret. For as long as I can remember, my brother has been my parents' favorite. It's not something they explicitly said, but actions speak louder than words. We grew up in a home where the rules seemed to be different for each of us. If I came home late, it was a problem. If he did, he was surely busy with something important. If I got good grades, it was the bare minimum expected. If he did, it was a reason to have a special dinner. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I wanted to be the center of attention or that I expected favoritism, but the difference in treatment was so obvious that it hurt. Over time, I learned to accept it. I focused on my own life and worked hard to achieve my goals without depending on anyone. My brother, on the other hand, always had unconditional support, even when he made bad decisions. My parents were always there to save him, justifying him, helping him financially and emotionally in ways they never extended to me. The breaking point came when I was organizing my wedding. My wife and I had been together for 5 years before getting engaged. We planned our wedding with a lot of love and detail, wanting it to be a special day not only for us, but also for our loved ones. Everything seemed to be in order until my brother decided to make a request that, honestly, I don't know if it qualified as absurd or selfish. He wanted to propose to his girlfriend during my wedding. He told me weeks in advance, and although I tried to handle it calmly, I made it very clear that my answer was no. Not because I wasn't happy for him or because I didn't want him to get engaged, but because my wedding was a day dedicated to my wife and me. Furthermore, it was our investment, our effort, and it didn't seem fair to me that someone else would try to steal the spotlight. When I told him, he became furious. He accused me of being selfish, of not wanting to see him happy, and even insinuated that I had always been jealous of him. Honestly, his words hurt me. But what bothered me the most was how quickly my parents intervened in his defense. Just a day after our conversation, my parents showed up at my house. My mother arrived in a flood of tears, yelling that she didn't understand why I hated my brother so much, that he just wanted to share his happiness, and that I was ruining a special moment for the family. My father, although quieter, clearly agreed with her. It was a tense and emotionally exhausting visit, but I stood my ground. I told them I wasn't going to let my brother take over my wedding. The days leading up to the event were marked by an uncomfortable silence. I didn't hear from my brother or my parents. I decided to focus on the final preparations with my wife, trying to ignore the dark cloud I felt forming over our celebration. The big day arrived, and everything started perfectly. The ceremony was beautiful, the guests were happy, and my wife and I felt on top of the world. But, as with every approaching storm, the calm didn't last. During the reception, just as we were cutting the cake, my brother got up from his seat. At that moment, I didn't notice him. I was so focused on enjoying the moment with my wife that I didn't realize what was about to happen. But then I heard the sound of the microphone being taken, and there he was, calling the attention of all the guests. "Before we continue with the celebration, I have something important to say," he announced. The rest of the room fell silent, and I felt my blood boil as I watched him kneel in front of his girlfriend with a ring box in his hand. My brother, with a triumphant smile, began to make a speech that, to be honest, I didn't hear completely. Something about how he and his girlfriend met, how she made him happy, blah, blah, blah. My attention was divided between him and the uncomfortable faces of our friends and family. Many looked towards us, as if waiting for our reaction. Others seemed completely surprised by my brother's audacity. And then he did it. He took out a ring and knelt in front of his girlfriend, proposing to her in the middle of our wedding. There was some timid applause, although most of the guests seemed as uncomfortable as I was. His girlfriend, of course, said yes, and as he hugged her, the cameras we hired to capture our moment were focused on them. I didn't know whether to laugh at the absurd audacity or break something from rage. But just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, one of my bridesmaids, who is also one of my best friends, approached with a glass of red wine. As she passed near my brother's girlfriend, her glass accidentally spilled all the contents over the white dress of his now fiancée. Yes, white, because, of course, she decided to dress like a bride to attend my wedding. The scream that my brother's girlfriend let out was heard throughout the entire room. It was a spectacle. "You did that on purpose," she shrieked as she tried to wipe the wine off her dress with a napkin. My friend, with a look of feigned innocence, apologized profusely. "Oh, I'm so sorry. How clumsy of me." Of course, this was not well received by my brother. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of me, accusing me of having planned everything. "It was your idea, wasn't it? You wanted to humiliate me," he yelled. I tried to remain calm and told him that I had nothing to do with what had just happened, but he didn't want to listen to reason. His face was red with anger, and he started yelling louder, attracting even more attention. That's when things got out of control. My brother started pushing me, demanding that I apologize to his girlfriend. I told him I wasn't going to, because I hadn't done anything wrong. By then, my wife was trying to mediate, asking everyone to calm down, but my brother wasn't willing to back down. "Admit that all this was planned. "You're a damn jealous person and you can't stand to see me happy," he shouted. I said something I probably shouldn't have said. If you're so worried about someone stealing your spotlight, maybe you should learn not to do it yourself first. It was as if I had just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Without thinking twice, my brother punched me in the face. That was the point of no return. In seconds, some friends and family were trying to separate us as we exchanged blows. My wife was crying, and many guests were starting to leave the room. It was absolute chaos. At some point, someone called the police. When they arrived, my brother was still yelling and resisting as they tried to calm him down. Finally, they handcuffed him and took him away. Seeing him being dragged out of the room was surreal, like something out of a movie. My wife and I stood there, amidst the disaster, trying to process what had just happened. Our perfect day had ended in a complete disaster. Some friends and family stayed to support us, but most of the guests left shortly after the police took my brother away. That night, as we were trying to regain some peace at home, my phone rang. It was my mother. I wasn't surprised to see her calling. I was sure she had already spoken to my brother. I answered more out of curiosity than anything else, but as soon as I heard her voice, I knew it was going to be an exhausting conversation. "What the hell did you do? How could you do this to your brother?" she began. Her tone was a mixture of anger and disappointment. She didn't even let me answer before continuing. "This was supposed to be a special day for the family, and you ruined it. You humiliated him in front of all your guests." I remained silent for a few seconds, trying to process what I was hearing. I had ruined it. I had humiliated him. I answered calmly, although my patience was already wearing thin. "Mom, he decided to propose during my wedding, after I told him not to. How is that my fault?" She didn't want to listen to reason. "He just wanted to share his happiness with you. That wasn't a bad thing. But you and your friends had to sabotage him with that wine mess, and then call the police to humiliate him further." My father, who rarely intervenes in these discussions, took the phone and said in a cold tone, "You have to fix this. Your brother is in jail, and someone has to pay the bail." That was the limit for me. I flatly refused. I told them that if they wanted him out, they could pay it themselves. Their response left me speechless. "We're in Italy, remember? He's on vacation. We can't do anything from here. And besides, it's not fair that he has to carry this when you started the problem." I tried to remain calm, but I ended up raising my voice. "I didn't start anything. He ruined my wedding, made a scene, and started a fight. And now you expect me to rescue him because you're too busy enjoying your vacation. Forget it. I'm not paying a penny for someone who has never shown respect for me or my wife." My mother, hysterical, came back on the phone. "If you don't pay the bail, at least do the right thing and reimburse his girlfriend's dress. It was a designer dress, and now it's ruined by your friend." I had to laugh. I literally laughed in her face. "Are you seriously asking me to pay for the white dress his girlfriend decided to wear to my wedding? As if she were the star? I'm not going to do it. What's more, I don't want to hear anything more about the subject. If you want to help him, do it yourselves. I'm officially out of this." I hung up before they could say anything else. I was furious. My wife, who had been listening to the conversation from the sofa, simply hugged me. She didn't say anything. There was no need. We both knew this drama was just beginning. The next day, my parents returned to the United States to fix the mess. What I didn't expect was that my brother, while I was trying to put everything behind me and move on, would decide to seek his own way of getting revenge. Update 1. The following day, I decided to get away from all the drama for a while and go out with my wife. After the disaster of our wedding, she wanted a distraction, and honestly, I needed one too. We went to the mall to buy some clothes. Something so simple, it almost felt like a relief after the emotional roller coaster of the previous days. While she was trying on a dress, my phone started ringing. It was my brother. I was about to ignore it, but a part of me thought that maybe he wanted to apologize, or at least try to explain himself. I answered cautiously. From the first word, I knew he was drunk. His tone was slurred and aggressive, and he could barely articulate the words. You've always been a damn problem, you know," he began. I replied, trying to stay calm. "What do you want now? If you're calling to continue with the same thing, I don't have time to listen to you." But he didn't let me finish. No. This time I want you to know something, because I don't care anymore. I don't care about this stupid family or what you think anymore. You know what? I'm going to keep everything," he yelled. I frowned. "What are you saying? What are you talking about?" He let out a bitter laugh. as if he was enjoying my confusion. Making it up? Ask them. Ask them if I'm not telling the truth. Although I bet they won't even have the courage to deny it, because they've always known that you're not important to them. I'm the favorite, and I always will be. Before I could respond, he hung up. I stood there holding the phone, while anger and pain mixed inside me. My wife came out of the fitting room, noticing my expression, and asked me what had happened. I told her what my brother had just said, and she was stunned too. I didn't know what to do. Confront my parents, try to confirm the truth. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but the other needed answers. That night, I decided to call my parents to ask them directly about the trust. I wanted to know if my brother was telling the truth, or if he was just drunk and talking nonsense. Their response was all I needed to confirm what my brother had said. That night, after mulling it over, I decided to call my parents. My wife supported my decision, even offered to be by my side while I did it, but I felt it was something I needed to handle alone. I called my mother first, since she has always been the one who makes the important decisions in the family. She answered on the second ring. Her tone was a mixture of irritation and weariness. What do you want now? Don't you think you've caused enough problems already? I ignored the comment and went straight to the point. I spoke with my brother. He told me something about a trust you have, and that it's only in his name. I want to know if it's true. The silence on the other side was long, so long that I thought the call had been cut off. Finally, she sighed. I don't know why you're talking about this now. It's a subject that shouldn't concern you. We know what's best for the family. Her evasion made my blood boil. That means it's true. Have you put everything in my brother's name? Finally, my father intervened, taking the phone. His voice was firm and sharp. Yes, we did. But that's not something you should question. We did it because we believe he's the one who has the most potential to handle it. You have your own life, your own path. You don't need this support like he does. I had to restrain myself from shouting. Potential? Do you really think he has potential? He's irresponsible and has never worked for anything in his life. And what about me? Am I not part of this family? Or was I just never enough for you? My mother took the phone again, probably trying to calm the situation down, but her words didn't help. It's not about being enough, honey. It's about needs. Your brother needs more help than you do. It's always been that way. And you? Well, you've always been independent. We don't need to worry about you. That phrase, we don't need to worry about you, was the straw that broke the camel's back. My whole life they had treated me like I didn't matter, and now I had confirmation that it really was true. So, basically, because I'm responsible and don't cause you problems, you decide to reward the one who does the exact opposite? Is that it? Is that how your logic works? I asked sarcastically. My father lost his patience. Enough. We're not going to discuss this with you. What's done is done. Learn to accept it and move on. And if you keep causing problems, we might make more changes to the will. That's clear. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My heart was pounding, and I felt a weight in my chest that I was struggling to process. My wife, seeing me enter the living room, stopped what she was doing and came to hug me. That night, I decided that I couldn't keep trying to maintain a relationship with them. I didn't see myself sharing more moments with a family that had clearly made a decision. I wasn't a priority, not even a consideration. But this wouldn't be the last time I'd hear about the trust or my brother. The real storm was yet to come. After the call with my parents, I felt a mixture of rage and resignation. I decided to say nothing more, nor get involved in the matter any further. My wife and I agreed to focus on our new life together and leave all the drama behind. However, my brother had other plans. A short time later, I started receiving messages from relatives, some of them surprised, others clearly annoyed. An aunt wrote me something like, "How could you be so cruel to your brother at your own wedding? He has always been so competitive with him. What a shame." A closer cousin sent me a different message. "Your brother is saying that you plan to ruin his life with that wine scene and the fight. He is also saying that you are trying to keep your parents' inheritance. Is that true?" My brother had started to build his own narrative, twisting the facts to make me look like the villain. In his version, I had planned everything: the wine incident, the fight, and even his arrest. According to him, it was all part of an elaborate plan to get my parents to disinherit him and transfer the trust to my name. It was a ridiculous accusation, but it worked enough to sow doubt in some family members. For days I was receiving calls and messages, some loaded with criticism, others seeking to clarify what was going on. Finally, One of my uncles, who has always been a neutral and wise figure within the family, decided to intervene. He called me to ask that we meet and try to resolve things like adults. Although I didn't want to, I agreed, thinking that maybe I could explain my version of the facts and, hopefully, clear things up. The meeting took place at this uncle's house. When I arrived, my brother was already there, accompanied by his allies, my parents and two of our cousins, who have always been closer to him. On my side, my wife decided to accompany me as support. As soon as I arrived, my brother started his show. With his dramatic tone and fake tears, he painted a picture of himself as the victim. I just wanted to do something nice for my girlfriend, something special, but he ruined everything, humiliating me in front of everyone. And now he's trying to take away the only thing I have left. My parents nodded with every word, while my mother murmured, "He's so cruel. I never thought he would be capable of something like this." I took a deep breath, trying not to lose my temper, and responded calmly, "Everything you're saying is a lie. You ruined my wedding by proposing to your girlfriend knowing that I asked you not to. Nobody humiliated you. You put yourself in that position by ignoring my boundaries. And about the inheritance, that's something you brought up yourself when you called me drunk. I have no interest in that trust, but I'm not going to let you keep making things up to make me look bad." The atmosphere became tense. My brother tried to interrupt me, but this time I didn't let him. I looked directly at my parents and added, "If you want to continue favoring him, go ahead. But don't expect me to stay quiet while you defame me in front of the whole family." That's when my uncle, who had been listening silently, intervened. "This has gotten out of control. What happened at the wedding was inappropriate, and it seems clear that both parties have their version of events. But what is wrong, regardless of perspective, is taking this to the rest of the family and creating more division. This is not something we should resolve as a group. It's something you three need to discuss in private." My brother was indignant. "And what about my reputation? He's attacking me, and everyone here knows it." My uncle looked at him sternly. "If you want to talk about reputation, you should start by taking responsibility for your actions. You made wrong decisions at your brother's wedding, and now you are paying the consequences. No one here is going to defend you if you keep acting like a victim." The comment was a direct hit, and the silence that followed was eternal. My parents didn't say anything else after that, and the meeting ended without any real resolution. But for me, it was a small relief to see that someone else understood what was really going on. Update 2. After the meeting at my uncle's house, it seemed that things were starting to calm down. My brother stopped contacting me, my parents remained silent, and the messages from relatives diminished. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. However, that calm didn't last long. One afternoon, while working from home, I received an unexpected email. It was an anonymous message, but its content was so detailed that I knew it came from someone close to my family. The message explained that the trust my brother had spoken about was not as simple as it had been presented to me. According to the sender, there were legal documents linked to the trust that my parents had never mentioned to me. Intrigued, I called my wife, and together we decided to investigate further. We hired a trusted lawyer to review the information. When we explained the situation and showed him the email, he recommended obtaining a copy of the trust, although he doubted that my parents would want to hand it over voluntarily. The lawyer found a way. Since I was their legitimate son, I had the right to request information about any provision that might directly affect me. When we finally gained access to the documents, the truth left me completely bewildered. The trust was indeed in my brother's name, but there was an important clause that no one had mentioned. In the event that my brother became involved in any serious legal scandal or proved incapable of managing the assets, the administration of the trust would automatically pass to another beneficiary, and that beneficiary was me. This explained why my brother had been so furious and desperate lately. His arrest at my wedding and the public fight had already put him in a compromising position. If he made another serious mistake, he would lose total control of the trust. That night, as my wife and I discussed what to do with this information, I received another unexpected call. My brother. His voice was colder than usual, and he sounded much more sober than on previous occasions. "I know you already know about the trust. Mom and Dad told me you got the documents." I didn't bother denying it. "Yes, I know. Why are you calling?" There was a pause before he continued. "I want you to renounce any right you have to the trust. Talk to a lawyer and sign whatever is necessary so you never have access to it, no matter what happens." I don't care what you have to do, but this can't be yours. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I laughed incredulously. Are you listening to yourself? This wasn't even my idea. It was our parents who did it this way. If it bothers you so much, talk to them. But his answer chilled me to the bone. I can't do that, and you know it. Because if you give them reasons to change anything else, you could take everything away from me. I'm not going to let that happen. That's when I understood. This wasn't just a fight about money or favoritism. My brother was afraid of losing everything, because deep down he knew he couldn't handle it. His whole life depended on a trust he hadn't even earned, and that insecurity was consuming him. I answered coldly, I'm not going to do anything. If you're so worried, maybe you should think about changing your behavior, instead of trying to blame me for your problems. I hung up before he could say anything else. Update 3. The days that followed were tense. My parents eventually confronted me, upset that I had accessed the legal documents. They tried to justify their actions, but it didn't matter to me anymore. I finally understood that it had never been a question of who was more worthy or deserving, but of keeping my brother on a pedestal no matter the cost. Since then, I have kept my distance. My brother is still trying to keep up appearances, but his erratic behavior and irresponsible decisions continue to be his worst enemy. I, for my part, have learned to set boundaries. After the call with my brother and the confrontation with my parents, I thought things would finally calm down. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when I received a legal notification. My brother was suing me. The argument was that my access to the trust was unfair, and that because of our bad relationship, I should not be considered as an alternate beneficiary. He alleged that the clause naming me as successor was abusive and detrimental to the efficient administration of the estate. Basically, he was doing everything possible to ensure that I could never touch that money. It was a low blow, but it didn't surprise me. My brother had always been someone who used every resource at his disposal to get what he wanted, and now he was willing to go to court to protect his position. I decided to fight back. I hired a lawyer specializing in trusts and estates, who assured me that the clause was perfectly legal and that my brother didn't have a solid case. The situation not only became a legal battlefield, but also a family spectacle. My parents clearly sided with my brother, attending the hearings and making derogatory comments about me to anyone who would listen. The process was long and exhausting. During the hearings, my brother tried to paint me as an opportunist, someone who was only looking to destroy his life. He claimed that my intention from the beginning was to take advantage of the trust clause to take away what was his. However, my lawyer was relentless. He presented evidence that the clause had been included by decision of my parents, not by me, and that it existed precisely because my parents did not fully trust my brother's ability to manage the estate in the long term. We also brought in witnesses, such as my uncle, who corroborated that my brother had a history of irresponsibility and erratic behavior. The most impactful part was when the court requested a breakdown of how my brother had managed the trust funds up to that point. It turned out that he had already spent a significant amount on frivolous things, luxury cars, extravagant vacations, and other excessive expenses. This not only damaged his case, but also reinforced the argument that the succession clause was a necessary and prudent measure. After weeks of hearings, the judge issued his ruling. The trust clause was valid, and my brother had no legal basis to invalidate it. Furthermore, due to his mismanagement of the funds and his erratic behavior, the court determined that he was not fit to continue administering the trust. The administration of the estate officially passed into my hands. It was a bittersweet moment. Although I won the case, I didn't feel any satisfaction in seeing my brother destroy himself in that way. I knew that this would not resolve our differences or repair the emotional damage that this situation had caused. My parents, of course, were furious. My mother accused me of being a traitor and of stealing my brother's future. My father barely spoke to me. But, honestly, I didn't care anymore. They had made their decision long before all of this started, and I had decided to make mine, to distance myself from them and their drama. Now that everything is over, I have made the decision to manage the trust responsibly. I don't intend to use it to enrich myself, but to ensure that the family's assets are preserved and used wisely. My brother and I haven't spoken since the trial, and my parents are still angry with me. But I have found something much more valuable than their approval, my freedom and peace of mind. Thanks to everyone who has followed this story. If you liked it, subscribe. Story 6. I was the only person who helped my ex-mother-in-law. When her whole family turned their backs on her, she recently passed away and left me her entire inheritance. Now there's a knock at my door, and when I open it, I see 8 people, all expecting their share. Hello, I'm Gigi, I'm 27 years old, and I live with my daughter Naomi, who's 7. My story is a bit complicated, but I'll try to summarize the important parts before I get to what's happening now. A few years ago, I was married to Jack, who's 30. Our marriage lasted almost 8 years, and although it had good moments, it ended in a way I never imagined. When I was pregnant with our second child, around the 2nd month, I discovered something that changed my life. One night, while Jack was sleeping, I received a message on his phone. It was from Susan, his coworker. The message was too clear to ignore. They were having an affair. My heart sank, but the worst came when I confronted him. Not only did he admit his infidelity, but he also told me, without any emotion, that Susan was pregnant with his child. It was as if he didn't care about the damage he was causing. I remember feeling like the ground was opening up beneath me. That discovery unleashed a series of events that still hurt me. The arguments with Jack became constant. And, although Margaret, my then mother-in-law, came to my house to try to mediate and help me, the stress overcame me. I lost the baby. The day it happened was one of the worst of my life. I was terrified, alone, and Jack, instead of staying with me, left with Susan. Even worse, he blamed me for the loss, saying that if I hadn't made such a big deal out of it, the baby would have survived. It was Margaret who stayed with me during those dark days. She took care of me when I couldn't even get out of bed. She looked after Naomi, who was barely 3 years old, making sure she had everything she needed while I cried inconsolably. Despite everything that happened, Margaret never judged or blamed me. Instead, she showed me unconditional love and support that I will never forget. The divorce with Jack was a nightmare. He tried to evade child support for Naomi and made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with us. When the judge finally forced him to pay, he only did so because he had no other choice. He didn't even try to maintain contact with Naomi, which broke my heart. Meanwhile, Susan gave birth to Jack's son, and since then, they have been together. For him, Naomi ceased to exist. In the midst of all this chaos, Margaret was the only constant in our lives. Even when her family pressured her to forgive Jack and accept Susan, she refused. She said she couldn't support something so unfair and harmful. This cost her dearly. Her family began to exclude her from events, gatherings, and practically cut her out of their lives. But Margaret, with her strength and determination, told me that I was her daughter, no matter what the rest of the family said. Over the years, our relationship grew even stronger. Margaret became not only Naomi's grandmother, but my closest family. That's why, when her health began to deteriorate and she lost the ability to walk, I didn't hesitate to take her into my home. I wanted to give back some of what she had done for me. And, although caring for her wasn't easy, I felt it was the right thing to do. What I never imagined is that her illness and death would unleash a conflict that now threatens to destroy the peace we managed to build. Update 1. When Margaret got sick, it was a hard blow for everyone, but especially for Naomi and me. We noticed it first in her movements, small stumbles, difficulty getting up from a chair. Then, her hands began to tremble, and finally came a diagnosis that none of us wanted to hear: progressive neurological degeneration. The doctors explained that her mobility would continue to worsen and that, eventually, she would need constant assistance. I remember the first time I sat down with Margaret to talk about this. We were at the dining room table. Naomi was playing in the living room with her dolls, and the sun was coming through the window, illuminating the wrinkles on Margaret's face. She, with that smile of hers that always seemed a little tired but genuine, took my hand and said, "Gigi, I don't want to be a burden to you or Naomi. If necessary, I can go to a nursing home." I refused immediately, not because it would be easy, but because I knew what she had done for me in my darkest moments. The idea of leaving her alone after everything she had sacrificed for us was unthinkable. Besides, Naomi adored her. Since Margaret moved in with us, Naomi seemed happier, more secure. She had someone to tell her secrets to, someone who listened attentively when she talked about her drawings or her adventures at school. So I made the decision Margaret would live with us. We reorganized the house to make it more accessible, adapted a room on the ground floor for her, and hired a caregiver to help her during the day while I worked. At night, it was my turn. Sometimes I stayed up late, making sure she was comfortable, that she took her medication, and that she knew she wasn't alone. It wasn't easy. There were times when I felt overwhelmed, exhausted. My routine changed completely. The days seemed endless between work, Naomi's school, housework, and caring for Margaret. But I never regretted it. On the contrary, I felt grateful to be able to give back a little of the love she had given us. Margaret's family, on the other hand, didn't see it that way. Shortly after she moved in, the comments started coming. First, there were well-intentioned phone calls from her siblings and nephews, suggesting that Margaret would be better off in a nursing home or with someone more qualified. Later, the comments turned into open criticism, accusing me of using her illness as an excuse to keep her house and money. One day, one of her brothers arrived unannounced. It was the first time anyone from her family had come since Margaret had moved in. Naomi and I were painting with watercolors in the living room, and Margaret was resting in her room. The man, an older man with a serious face and a critical gaze, said to me directly, "Why do you insist on staying with her? This is not your responsibility. Her place is with her family." I took a deep breath before answering. I am her family, and here she is surrounded by love and care. Why don't you ask Margaret where she wants to be? He didn't say anything else. He left shortly after, but I understood that this was only the beginning of the conflicts to come. Although I knew the criticism wouldn't stop, I didn't let it affect me. Margaret was happy with us, and that was all that mattered. Naomi kept drawing hearts on the cards she made for her grandmother, and I kept getting up every day with the conviction that we were doing the right thing. What I didn't know at the time was that, for Margaret, all of this was more important than I thought, because shortly after, she gave me news that would change everything. Update 2. With Margaret living with us, our family dynamic began to transform in ways I hadn't anticipated. Naomi was absolutely delighted to have her grandmother at home. For her, Margaret wasn't a sick woman or someone who needed constant care. She was her best friend, her confidant, and her playmate. Seeing them together was like witnessing a small but powerful miracle, love in its purest form. Every afternoon, Naomi would drag her crayons and papers to Margaret's room to show her her drawings. Margaret, despite her worsening health, always found the energy to admire them and give her little tips. "This is beautiful, honey, but what do you think if we add a little blue here?" she would say, pointing to the sky in a drawing full of flowers and animals. Naomi obeyed, delighted, as if each suggestion were a magic secret that made her drawings better. However, there were nights when Margaret and I talked alone, and her tone was more serious. She told me how isolated she felt from her own family, how it hurt her that her children and grandchildren, except Naomi, had practically forgotten her. She often told me that she had made decisions that she herself considered drastic, but that she didn't regret them. "Gigi, you and Naomi are all I have left," she told me one night while I adjusted her pillows. Her voice was charged with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "You're more my daughter than any of them will ever be." Her words moved me, but they also worried me. Although Margaret's family had almost completely cut off contact, I couldn't help but feel that something would eventually explode. I felt it like a dark cloud on the horizon. But, for the moment, I focused on keeping the peace in our house. Margaret, for her part, found ways to contribute to our little family despite her limitations. Although she could no longer move easily, she helped us with advice and her quiet wisdom. When Naomi had a difficult question about life, or about why her dad never visited her, Margaret found the words that I couldn't. "Your dad is complicated, honey," she once said. "But that doesn't mean you're not a wonderful girl, and you should never think it's your fault." That seemed to calm Naomi, at least for a while. But for me, every mention of Jack was a reminder of everything we had lost, and, somehow, everything we had gained as well. One day, while the three of us were in the living room watching a movie, Margaret took my hand and looked me straight in the eyes. "I want you to know something, Gigi. I changed my will." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know if I wanted to hear what was coming next, but Margaret didn't give me time to respond. "I've left everything to Naomi, and a significant portion will be for you." I remained silent. I didn't know how to react. On the one hand, I felt deeply grateful. On the other, I worried about what that might mean in the future. "Margaret, you don't have to do this. It's your decision." "Of course, but if you want to include J.O., Susan's son, I'll understand." She shook her head firmly. "No, Jack made his decisions. Susan made hers. You were the only one who was here when no one else was. You and Naomi are my family. I accepted her decision, although deep down I was left with a strange feeling, as if this were the beginning of something big, something I couldn't control. In the meantime, we went on with our lives as best we could. Margaret enjoyed the sunny days sitting in the garden. Naomi continued drawing worlds full of color, and I kept working to keep us afloat. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that the calm in our little bubble wouldn't last forever. Update 3. A couple of months passed since Margaret told me about her decision, and although I tried not to think too much about it, the subject came back to my mind from time to time. I worried about what her family might do when they found out. Even though they hardly visited her or cared about her well-being, I knew that money and property could make anyone change their attitude. One day, while we were having dinner, Margaret brought up the subject again. She had received a letter from her lawyer confirming the changes in her will, and she wanted to make sure I understood how everything would be handled. Gigi, I want you to know that I did this out of conviction. Don't feel guilty or let anyone make you doubt. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help but express my fears. Margaret, I'm not worried about me, but I am worried about what your family will do when they find out. You know how they've been lately. I don't want this to turn into a battle. She sighed and looked at me with that mixture of tenderness and determination that always characterized her. I know there will be problems, Gigi, but I'm not going to change my decision. Jack and Susan don't deserve anything. They left me alone, just like the rest of the family. You and Naomi have been my only real family in these last few years, and I want you to be safe when I'm gone. Her words left me without arguments. I couldn't tell her she was wrong, because, in reality, she wasn't. Jack hadn't done anything for his mother since she got sick, and the same could be said for his siblings and nephews. They had preferred to wash their hands of the situation, letting Margaret face her illness without their support. What moved me most about the conversation was how she insisted on including Naomi in her plans. For Margaret, Naomi wasn't just her granddaughter. She was her legacy. She wanted to make sure that my daughter had a secure future, full of opportunities, and that was something I couldn't ignore. Shortly after that conversation, Margaret began to get worse. Her moments of lucidity became shorter, and her energy decreased considerably. The good days became less frequent, and the nights were filled with long, reflective silences. I knew the end was near, but I wasn't prepared to face what was coming. One day, I called Jack. It was a difficult call to make, because I knew he probably wouldn't care, but I felt it was my duty. I explained that his mother was getting worse, and that, if he wanted to see her, he should do it soon. Okay, I'll go, he replied, but his tone was cold, as if I were asking him for an inconvenient favor. When he finally arrived, he brought Susan with him. It was an uncomfortable and brief visit. Margaret was conscious, but she barely spoke to them. Jack simply asked about superficial things, as if he were checking a box on a to-do list. Susan didn't say much, although I could notice how she looked around the house, as if she were evaluating it. They just left. I knew they didn't care, but seeing it up close hurts more than I imagined. That was one of the last things she said to me before her health completely deteriorated. We cared for her until the last moment, making sure she was comfortable and surrounded by love. Naomi was by her side when she finally closed her eyes. Margaret passed away one quiet morning, in her bed, with Naomi holding her hand. It was a moment of peace and sadness, a goodbye that felt like the end of an era. Although it hurt deeply, I also felt relief knowing that she was no longer suffering. In the following days, while organizing the funeral and beginning to process her loss, I couldn't stop thinking about her last words. She had done everything possible to protect us, but I also knew that this was only the beginning of a battle that she wouldn't be here to fight. Update 4. Margaret's funeral was simple but beautiful, just as she would have wanted. Naomi and I made sure she had the vibrant colored flowers she loved so much, and that everyone knew how incredible she was. Most of the people who attended were close friends of Margaret and some of her co-workers from years ago. From her immediate family, few people came: Jack, Susan, and a couple of distant cousins. Jack was at the funeral with the same distant attitude as always, as if it were more of an obligation than a real loss. Susan, for her part, maintained an air of discomfort the whole time, as if she were waiting to be invited to leave. Both stayed just long enough to offer condolences, and then they left. Part of me was relieved. I didn't want them to ruin a moment that should be one of respect and love for Margaret. After the funeral, I focused on getting back to routine. Naomi was sad, but seemed to find comfort in the happy memories she shared with her grandmother. I, for my part, felt the void of her absence in every corner of the house. But I knew Margaret wouldn't have wanted us to wallow in sadness. So I tried to move on. It was a week after the funeral when that knock came at the door. I was picking up toys from the living room floor while Naomi was drawing at the dining room table. The sound startled me because it was insistent, almost aggressive. When I opened the door, I found a scene I will never forget. In front of me were Jack, Susan, and 6 other people. I recognized some of them. They were Margaret's siblings and nephews, those who had barely bothered to visit her in her last years. They all had tense, almost demanding expressions. "Can we come in? We need to talk," Jack said, without bothering to greet me. My instinct was to say no, but something in his tone let me know that if I didn't let them in, the situation would only get worse. So, with a sigh, I opened the door and invited them into the small hallway. They stood there,